well, welcome to our next session. And I think I'll just turn it over to our presenter in just a second, who's Christoph Knoblauch, who is with us from the University of Education in Ludwigsburg, Germany. And we are pleased to have him here to talk about digital project-based learning in the higher education sector. And I think I can go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks very much for the introduction, David. Warm welcome from the city of Tübingen and the University of Education in Ludwigsburg, both located in the south of Germany, close to the city of Stuttgart. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for the possibility to speak about the topic of digital and project-based learning in the higher education sector. Thanks very much, Gary and Hui Su. I don't know if you're with us right now. Anyways, thanks a lot for your presentation. With the title Project-Based Learning Comes Digital. Very helpful for me and a good foundation for what we're looking at now. Now let me have a short look at what I'm going to talk to you in this short presentation. First of all, I would like to give you an insight into the structure of a project-based course, which was implemented in the summer term of 2020 at the University of Education. Then I would like to focus on three main points of this course. It's a collaborative course, it's interactive, and it's blended in the way that it uses a variety of digital perspectives and methods and ways of learning, but also blended because it encourages students to develop projects and implement projects in a digital and, if possible, a face-to-face situation. How do students think about these situations? How do students think about the course, project-based and digital? My colleagues and I, we did a short empirical study, a feedback study on the course, which was very helpful for us in order to get an insight into the students' preferences, attitudes towards digital and project-based learning, and especially the combination of these two. I would like to finish with a short outlook, especially focusing on the question, what can we learn from the course? What did we learn from the course and the feedback of the students when we're looking at the development of new project-based and digital classes? Now, first of all, obviously, digital settings have become a main issue for learning. Digital learning has changed considerably in the face of new challenges. I don't mean in the first hand the pandemic, which we're facing, but globalization, of course, digitalization, but the pandemic finally drew digital learning to a level, we heard this a couple of times today before, that connected it basically to all kinds of learning and education. So the world of learners and teachers has become more autonomous, at least in the field of the higher education, the higher education sector, and it has become more interconnected due to these issues, globalization, digitalization, and the pandemic. The idea to combine project-based and digital learning is one of the most important ideas, I think personally, what we've been dealing with in the field of education in the last years, because it helps us to cope with new challenges, especially with the pandemic, because it encourages students on a variety of levels, on various levels. It motivates students in order to work autonomously and to work collaboratively in digital settings. It can offer tools for, of course, communication, autonomous learning, collaboration, and shared learning. As I said before, the autonomous learning and the collaboration between students and students and teachers is one of the main focuses of our course. The higher education sector plays a major role in this development. It can prepare students for learning and teaching in more autonomous, project-based and digital contexts. Now, let's have a look at the University of Education and this specific course after this short context of the class and the course and why we developed it in this way. It is part of the teacher education program, which becomes important in a second because it connects students to their future work field. That is one of the main ideas of the project-based course. It connects students also to empirical studies in the field of education, and it aims at a very individual and interest-driven approach through the student. Key questions of the course is: how do students actually cope with project-based learning courses when it is so closely, almost completely connected to a digital setting? So students' attitudes, practices, preferences concerning digital and project-based learning and competence development play a major role in the design of the course and its evaluation. Main foci of the course, two of them I already mentioned. First of all, we started with a theoretical framework which combined the first 2 points, discussion of empirical studies already implemented in the field of education. So the students could choose between different studies. They were going through these studies, they were looking at the research methods, they were looking at the outcomes, the findings, etc. Then we had kind of a toolkit prepared for them where empirical research methods were introduced and were discussed in terms of their helpfulness for different projects and different designs. And then C, the autonomous implementation of a small-scale empirical project study within the field of education. So all the students have had to develop a project, empirical project with a research question, etc., in the field of education, following their interests. So the digital project-based character of the course aims for the interconnection of students with their future work area, education, with future colleagues, because many of them were interviewing teachers and professors, also their future students. Others were interviewing pupils and actually participating in schools and kindergartens. And they had to reflect they had to develop this empirical study, and then they had to reflect on the findings. Basis mostly was Gudjon's project-oriented learning. Now, how did we design this course? I said before, collaborative, interactive, and blended. Now, 50% of the course, especially the theoretical framework of the course, was carried out in a digital and asynchronous way. We worked with Moodle as a learning platform, which I actually appreciate because it's very reliable. It works. It's not very user-friendly. It doesn't have a great look to it. We were talking about design earlier. However, it works, and students also kind of appreciate the way that it works and that it's very reliable. The other 50% were conducted in a synchronous digital way, mostly using video conferences, Zoom or WebEx were our choices. Now, the asynchronous sessions, so the theoretical framework, we worked with presentations with audio commentary. We had the podcast, which was designed especially for this course. We obviously had a selection of literature, research methods, and research designs, etc. We had videos of professors and students working in empirical research, and we had various digital forums for interactive exchange, some of them embedded in Moodle, others like Padlet, you could link to Moodle easily. The synchronous sections were kind of a flipped classroom theme. So there was a guided discourse offering the chance to reflect on the contents of the course, but also to discuss and to present empirical studies designed, well, the design of the empirical studies, first of all. Also, there was the chance of individual mentoring. So we could actually give students the possibility to discuss their projects beforehand with professors in order to carry them out successfully afterwards. So digital learning is understood as a form of blended learning. I said this before, combining a variety of digital methods, but also within the projects implemented by the students, face-to-face sessions, if it was possible. Now, most of the students did the implementation of the projects in October, November 2020. And we had a bad time concerning COVID in this period. So there were only partly face-to-face possibilities. Now let's have a look at the time frame of the class. As I said before, we had a theoretical foundation in spring. Then we had the development of the concepts and the close mentoring, individual mentoring in late spring and early summer. Then we had the implementation of the studies and then the presentation phase of the classes, which also is a very important part of the class, as the students presented all their studies, the design of the studies, the implementation of the studies, and obviously the findings. And then there was a reflection of the work after the semester in form of a paper, which was students were asked to give an elaborate insight into their studies and especially reflect on the findings and what they could change within another project, the next empirical study they might want to come up with. So after the class in late autumn, we asked the students in a qualitative study basically what they liked and disliked about the course, how they worked, how they combined digital learning and project-based learning. The study was conducted digitally, which was new to me, to be honest. It intends to create a flexible research process. Obviously, it produces various findings, and it had to meet the COVID-19 regulations of the time. As I said before, it was not possible to meet the students in face-to-face settings in autumn 2020 in Germany. So we used semi-structured qualitative interviews, and they were carried out in an asynchronous digital way, which is a rather new technique in qualitative research. So we didn't find many studies who worked with this method. It certainly encouraged respondents to reflect on their answers beforehand. So the students had a chance to structure their responses, to reflect on their answers. It allowed them to structure their ideas, which was very helpful for many students and which was very helpful for us in order to work with the categories, the deductive categories we came up with beforehand, because it was quite easy to fill these categories because of the students who structured their answers beforehand. However, there's drawbacks of these techniques, obviously, lack of face-to-face interaction, not really the possibility of a constructive dialogue because it was conducted asynchronously. This has been taken into account and plays a role in the analysis of the data, but we were not able to discuss with students during this interview. We were not able to ask them questions which might have helped us to get more inductive categories in the analysis of the data. The semi-structured questionnaire was sent via email. It addresses the students and then it gives them very clear operation guidelines on how to produce an audio file, and then they send this audio file back to us. I would like to focus on four categories which are especially interesting when we're looking at the combination of digital and project-based learning. Motivations for enrollment, project-based character of the course, and then the implementation in digital contexts and the digital character of the course in general. Now let's start with the first category. Many students actually told us that they liked the individual character of the course. They were able to produce and to develop and then implement an individual research project which was connected to their studies and to their interests and to their future work field. So a hands-on approach which produced insights with a practical orientation. The students' questions were very closely connected to their subjects, to their interests, to what they studied before, and to what they expect at becoming problems in school, for example, questions in school. The idea of autonomous and project-based work seemed to be very important for many students, and some of them reported that they missed working independently in their studies so far. And when I look back at my studies quite some time ago, I have to admit there was not so much time for individual and autonomous work. So I can see this point, and this is certainly an option to give students the opportunity to work autonomously through both project-based learning. Now, the project-based character of the course, again, to pursue individual interests. Then practical things like individual time management, the fact that I worked on my own project and I could actually see I can do this. Confidence through project-based work, very important factor for many students. Students told us that it helped them to experience they can actually do something. They can do more than learn and then afterwards go to an exam and pass, which is a good experience if you pass. But they can actually develop something and they can come up with a question which has not been asked before. So they can do something new. They can work in the field of scientific research with the perspective of education. However, with all this individual time management, the pursuing of individual interests, many students asked for a solid course structure. They appreciated the fact that we tried to give them a close and solid course structure to set a framework and to have individual mentoring for them in order to help them to develop their and implement their projects successfully. Many students also obviously report that they missed the presentations and discussions in face-to-face settings. Let's have a look at what the students actually did, or rather how they did it, how they implemented their projects in digitally, partly or fully digitally contexts. Now, some of them actually developed their projects, conducted their projects in fully digitally contexts. So they didn't meet anybody in face-to-face settings. They met students or teachers via phone or video calls or emails and so on. Some of them did a blended approach. They had fully digitally synchronous and asynchronous sessions with, for example, teachers. They were asking about certain impacts in their teaching. And some of them did blended versions of face-to-face and digital settings. And just a few actually had the possibility to work in face-to-face settings all the time. If I remember it correctly, the COVID regulations of the time said 3 people can meet outside and with masks, obviously. So some of them did that. Now, the group who worked fully digitally, they appreciated the possibility to record the sessions via video conferencing software, to distribute digital materials before including the study, the chance to meet without using car and public transports, again, very practical things, time-saving aspects, and the opportunity to gather and share information online and simultaneously. Now, the face-to-face group especially pointed out that interaction with children in primary school or early childhood education needs face-to-face settings. So it wouldn't have been possible for them to work in digital settings. That is possible with all the students and then, of course, in the higher education sector or with teachers. They cherished the unobstructed flow of information and communication in face-to-face settings. And I guess they're right. Some of the materials, probably all of them, may have a better effect in face-to-face session, especially when you're talking about certain items you might use in school and which impact they might have on a class. So you can share these items, you can have a look at these items, you can touch them. Last but not least, the digital character of the whole course. In general, we see a very high acceptance of digital learning. If the courses offer a variety of different digital learning methods, basically as in the classroom. I mean, you reach different students by using different methods, by giving them different forms of input. And I had a look at these inputs before, especially the presentations with audio comments seem to be very comfortable, as one of the students says, because one doesn't have to make notes under time constraints and one can really think things through. You can have a look at them again and again. You can listen to the audio commenters. So you have a framework and you have the audio with it, and you can use it as often as you want and whenever you want. I hope we can use many of these methods in the future courses. Again, one of the students said, I hope so as well, even though, of course, it has to be, or at least I wish it's going to become a blended version of face-to-face meeting and digital project-based work in the near future. So 4 things that I want to keep in mind. The project-based courses in the digital setting require a structure which enable students, first of all, to find themes and develop projects individually, then to share and discuss these ideas online, then to develop shared knowledge through collaboration, and finally to develop new content and tasks for themselves and others. Now, we were not able to give point 4 to most of the students because the presentations, we heard all the presentations, but we didn't, or we missed the chance, that's a better way of putting it, we missed the chance to actually use these presentations and the findings for the group and for future groups. Now, we developed a hub for this, where students can share the presentations now, and this hub is open for the next class as well. So we have a foundation for the next upcoming class. Digital project-based learning work can certainly be a crucial factor for learning experiences because it shows students what they can actually achieve, even though at home, not in face-to-face settings. It has to set appropriate goals for autonomous work. It has to give, as I said, a reliable structure, frequent opportunities for individual and collaborative revision, and a connection to the work field. I mean, this was one of the most important points when it comes to student motivations, which we were told. Now, if we have these things ready, I guess digital and project-based learning can be regarded as transformative, as it meets the challenges of the time. And it does meet these challenges constructively if it supports students in their ways of becoming autonomous experts. So showing them that they can become experts, that they can develop an expertise in a special field, an expertise professor than other students can't come up with because they didn't do the project. They haven't been in the empirical study. So the students become experts, the students show what they can achieve, connected to their interests and their future working field. Thanks very much for listening. I'm very much looking forward to answer some of your questions.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. And then we can open up the floor for questions. So, yeah, if we have any questions from the audience, we have just a few minutes for those. All right, and we see one in the Q&A, and okay, and the question is, what are some of the measures that we consider, so I guess that you consider to keep students motivated in this this model?
Well, thanks very much for these questions. I don't know for sure, obviously, but I can guess. I mean, I know some of the students for quite a long period of time. The fact I said that at the end, the fact that we can show students through project-based learning in digital context as well, that they can achieve a certain mastery, that they can achieve a certain expertise in their fields, is for many students a completely new feeling, because for a couple of semesters, at least in our context, many students have the feeling we have to learn something and then we have to reproduce and reproduce again. So the project-based character, I guess, is something in a small scale or on a bigger scale, as we did in this class, that shows students they can actually achieve something, they become experts for others, and then they can learn by teaching, learn by presenting. So they give their presentation about the development, about the problems of their project and so on. And by that, I guess their motivation stays at a very high level.
And related to that, I'm curious about how people used the discussion forums, and it sounds like they were pretty into them. So did you feel that the project-based approach really helped people have more in-depth discussions in the discussion forums rather than kind of, popping on every once in a while and saying something and then checking back in a week later, as tends to happen in some classes?
Very much so, because of 2 points, I guess. First of all, you want to know what the others are doing. Now, is there somebody who has a certain, like the same interests? And if not, what are they looking at? So they come from all different subjects, biology, theology, mathematics, whatever. So you want to know what other people are doing. And are they asking students or teachers? Are they in the kindergarten field, or are they in primary school, and so on? The second point is you need help during your project, and you can get this by individual mentoring through the professors, but it's quite easier and I guess more comfortable for the students to ask peers. So what kind of semi-structured interview are you using? Which research method, which methods for analyzing and interpreting? So yeah, the very, very active discussions in the discussion boards.
Great. And we have one new question that's come in, which is from Jenny, which is, what about the online assessment tools for large groups of students?
Well, we didn't have to assess these because the students were coming up with their presentations at the end of the semester. So we had a block of 3 or 4 weeks where we had ongoing flow of presentations synchronously and asynchronously. And that was the basis for the assessment and finally also the grading.
So everything was done. So that worked well, I think, because you had a manageable class size, I assume, right? That was one of the issues.
32.
Yeah, 32. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely managing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. I know that. I've experienced that one myself, and when it gets a little bit bigger, then it becomes a challenge to try to give appropriate feedback to everybody and try to hopefully can keep the class sizes down to a manageable scale. All right. Well, terrific. Well, I think we are just about at the noon hour Eastern time here, and I want to thank you so much for your presentation, which was terrific and interesting, and our audience seems to think so as well. And thanks to everyone for being here for our first section and first segment of the conference. And we're gonna have an hour and a half break. We'll be back with 3 conference streams starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, and hope to see all of you back then. So thanks once again.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you around. Thank you.
Absolutely. You too. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.